Hi, I'm Evan Sagliano, reporter at the Western Front. I'm here with Anna Ellermeier, newly elected AS President.
Thank you, Evan.
So Anna, what are your goals as AS President, and what have past AS Presidents done that you would do differently?
Yeah, there are 4 things that come to mind right now. The first one is making the AS board more visible. This is something that I heard throughout the campaign trail, saying, wow, we see you out in Red Square with your signs when you want to get elected, but then you disappear into your offices. And so that's something that I'd really like to work on. I think that the utilization of social media is going to be a really important thing coming up this year and obviously in the future. I'm a really strong advocate for meeting students where they're at and not necessarily saying, I think it's important to have open door policies, but also saying, I'm going to go and meet you where you are, whether that's in the residence halls, at RHA, at hall councils, or whether that's on Facebook, or whether it's on YouTube. I think that that's a place that a lot of students are maybe not literally at, but certainly spend a lot of their time. Another thing that I'd like to work on is making stronger connections with other universities. I think that in the summer we have a really great opportunity to start making personal connections with other AS boards and utilizing them as resources in not only just ideas, like what are some programs that you've done that are really effective, what's your structure look like, how do you facilitate student input, but also by saying, let's start to have a more concentrated lobbying effort in Olympia, or let's start to work together more on issues that are outside of necessarily just budget cuts or legislative issues. Another thing that I like to do is really focus on supporting our AS employees, because the Associated Students is going to have an increasingly important role as we start to see the effects of the budget cuts in creating a campus environment that is positive and inviting and engaging. And I think that our AS employees are some of the people who are really going to lead that cause. And so I'd like to focus on supporting them and focus on really kind of setting the tone in the Associated Students that our jobs are in service of students. And I think that a lot of AS employees do an incredible job of exemplifying that mission and that goal. Another thing I'd like to do is work with my vice presidents. I think that something that I've heard a lot from former AS presidents is that you are not the person who does the projects. Like, the AS president is not the person who kind of really does the work. They set the direction, they set the tone. They're the advocate, the representative for students in kind of the broadest sense, and they're the ones that needs to really have the broad perspective. And so I really want to focus on supporting my vice presidents and the agendas that they would like to carry out, and being able to really support them in their goals.
So on the campaign trail, you talked about giving a voice to the student body. How do you plan on representing the 15,000 students at Western, all with differing viewpoints and opinions?
Well, I talked a little bit about how I'd like to make the AS board more visible, and I think that that's a really important piece in that, you know, we are 7 students and we have a really valuable perspective, but we also need the input from the students to know kind of what they're going through, and especially as we face these really challenging times where the budget cuts are going to start to become a reality, we can't predict how students are going to react to that or what the effects of that are going to be. And so we need to really find effective ways to gather that student input. Another thing that I'd like to focus on is finding ways for students to represent themselves and finding ways for students to advocate with their own voice. I think we have a lot of really excellent avenues set up right now through our committee system, and I'd like to see that strengthened. I think that we do not prepare our students well enough for the committees that they sit on, for them to truly be empowered advocates for themselves and for their peers. So I'd like to work with the representation and engagement programs to start to develop really strong committee training. And I'd also like to work with my vice presidents, who also sit on quite a few student committees, to really talk about, like, what does student empowerment look like? What do we want a student who's on budget committee to know? How do we want them to be able to engage in that process? Because that's why we have students on these committees. And if they don't come in with the knowledge and the preparation to really be able to be an active member of that committee, we're not only doing them a disservice, we're doing all the other students a disservice. I think it's a wonderful thing that we have such strong student representation on committees, and we really need to utilize it more. Another thing that I'd like to look into, and something that we've already started having discussions about, is utilizing the Student Senate more and maybe making it look a little bit different than it does now, to create a body that really can truly be the liaison between the students and the AS board. Like I said, there's 7 of us. We have a lot of job responsibilities, and I know that every single one of my vice presidents and myself are incredibly committed to getting student input, but there's only 24 hours in a day. And so I think that as we, kind of get adjusted into our positions, we can start looking for ways to really maximize the amount of student input that we're getting. And so those are kind of the ways that I'd like to see students better represented next year.
So you also said you were committed to protecting student jobs. How do you plan on doing this?
Great question. I think that we need to have a stronger lobbying effort, and I also think we need to have a more nuanced lobbying effort. Like I said before, I think we need to start working with other universities. I'd like to start seeing more of a, when we go to Olympia, I want to say higher education is important. You know, it's a public good, it's valuable for our state, but also being able to say, we understand you have to make cuts, and here's how we want to prioritize it. You know, if student jobs are something that's really important to us, which I believe it is, things like work study, that we need to be able to go down there and say why and articulate exactly what those values are, and also educate the legislature about what work study is or why student jobs are important, because a lot of them don't know. And so I think that the associated students, especially the president and especially our vice president for governmental affairs, really needs to be an advocate for that kind of education for the legislators. And I also think that something that I'm really excited about is an initiative that our Vice President for Governmental Affairs is kind of spearheading, is creating club lobby trips. And so this is not necessarily sending clubs down there to say, we really support higher education, but it's sending clubs down there to say, we really support having solar panels in Whatcom County, or we really support, you know, human rights in foreign countries, and being able to allow or to give students the resources to express their passions to the people who make the budget decisions in Olympia is going to be something that's really powerful, I think, because the students sell the school. We don't need to go down there as a school and say, Western's great, believe us, you know, here we have some statistics, but like literally sending students down there and the legislators being able to say, wow, Western is great, you are so passionate and you are so invested in what you're doing, and how could I not want to invest in that for the future of Washington? And so those are some of the things that I'd like to start seeing.
So how do you feel about the incoming board, and how do you think this board compares to past boards?
That's a good question. Well, I think that we haven't actually assumed our positions yet, so it's a little hard to say, you know, how do we measure up or how do we compare. That'll probably be for the students to decide as we go into summer and go into fall. But I think that I'm really confident. No, I know that I'm really confident in the vice presidents the students have elected. We are all going to bring something really different to the table, and I think that's really critical on a board. We've started working together already. We've been having meetings, we've been talking about our goals, and something that I've really been heartened by, and I'm really proud to be on a board where everyone is really student focused. And something that I think sometimes I have concerns about with past boards is that people come in with their own agendas and say, you know, as Anna Ellermeier, I really want to do X, Y, Z, but you kind of stop being yourself when you become elected, and it's more like, as the AS president, this is what I think students need. And so I think that everyone that's coming into the board really has that perspective, and I think that is going to serve students really well. I think another thing is that we all have a really strong focus on teamwork. And we all have a really strong focus on being a cohesive board, which in my opinion is the best way that we can serve students. I don't think a divided board serves students well. I think that a board that works towards consensus and works through its problems, and if somebody has a concern with a document or an item, that we work through that and we don't just say, okay, fine, vote against it. So I think that the perspective people are coming in with, the focus on teamwork, and just their competency and their leadership and their experience is going to be something that I think students should get really excited about, because I'm really excited about it.
In your opinion, what are the limitations of the AS president?
Well, certainly there are limitations just based on the scope of the role. I mean, I'm the AS president, not the governor, not the US president, and I think those limitations are pretty clear. But I think another limitation that maybe we haven't thought about a lot in the past years is that the AS president has a year. I mean, unless you're running for re-election, which I'm certainly not, you really have a year to kind of get the things done that you want to see accomplished. And I think that we need to start moving away from the perspective of coming in and being like, all right, it's my year, 2011 to 2012. There's nothing happened before and nothing will happen after, and I need to get everything done in this year. But more saying, what's happened before? Where's the momentum? You know, what foundations have other presidents kind of built and started that I can build off of, and what foundations do I want to leave for the next president. And I think that in the AS as a whole, we see that kind of turnover, and there are really good things about that turnover, that we have a new employee in most positions every year, that we have creative ideas that come in every year, we have a new person, a new perspective, but we also see some disadvantages, and that there isn't a lot of continuity, and that there's always a certain element of kind of reinventing the wheel every year. And so I'd like I am working with Colin a lot, Colin Watchman, the current AS president, on talking about how we can kind of create that continuity and kind of shift the perspective of the position and shift the perspective of the organization into more of this, like, you just have a broader sense of what you're doing and a broader sense of how best to serve students. And so that's kind of the limitation of the AS president role that I see that I'd like to work on next year.
Excellent. Well, once again, thanks for meeting with us, Anna, Western's newly elected AS president, and good luck to you and the board next year.